The blue glow of the holographic projector filled the United Nations Assembly Hall as the transmission began. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their designated seats, expecting another routine diplomatic meeting. Instead, they found themselves staring at something that would change humanity forever. The figure that materialized before them was massive, standing at least 9 feet tall. 4 muscular arms extended from a torso covered in dark chitinous armor that seemed to absorb the light around it. The creature's head was elongated, with mandibles that clicked and twitched as it spoke. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glowed with an amber fire that seemed to burn with ancient malice. "Greetings, primitive species of the 3rd planet from your star," the being said. Its voice was a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very air, but somehow the words came out in perfect English through some kind of translation device. "I am War Chief Valix of the mighty Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain." Gasps and whispers rippled through the assembly hall. Several representatives reached for their phones, but security quickly gestured for them to remain still and silent. This was clearly not a hoax or some elaborate presentation. The being before them was real, and its presence meant that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "For the past 1,000 cycles, our empire has grown across the stars," Valix continued, his mandibles clicking with each word. 17 star systems now bow before our might. Countless species have learned to serve under our rule. Your turn has come?" The alien's forearms gestured, and the hologram around him shifted. Suddenly, the assembly hall was filled with horrific images: burning cities under alien skies, massive ships raining fire from above, crowds of strange beings in chains, working in what looked like mining operations or factories. Children of various alien species huddled together in cages. However, Valix said, as the images faded back to his imposing form, "Our ancient codes of honor demand that we offer you the trials of supremacy. This is more mercy than most species receive. You will select your 5 greatest warriors and send them to our arena at Nexus Station. There, they will face our champions in combat." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the stunned humans. "Should your warriors prove worthy through victory, your species will be granted the honor of serving as vassals under our protection. You will maintain some autonomy over your world while contributing to the glory of our empire. Should your warriors fail..." The hologram showed more images of destruction and slavery. "Well, you have seen what awaits those who cannot prove their worth." Ambassador Jinwoo Park sat in the front row, his weathered hands folded calmly in his lap. At 73 years old, he had spent more than 4 decades in international diplomacy. He had negotiated treaties during wars, helped resolve border disputes, and mediated conflicts between nations that had hated each other for centuries. But nothing in his long career had prepared him for this moment. Behind him, he could hear the barely contained panic of his colleagues. Someone was whispering urgent prayers in Spanish. Another representative was quietly crying. President Rodriguez, sitting just to his left, had gone completely pale and seemed to be having trouble breathing. But Jinwoo remained calm. His mind was already working, analyzing the situation with the same methodical approach he had used to solve countless diplomatic crises. This alien spoke of honor and trials. That suggested a culture with rules, traditions, perhaps even weaknesses, that could be exploited. Slowly, Jinwoo stood up. His movement was steady and deliberate, showing no fear or hesitation. Every eye in the room turned to him, including the burning amber gaze of War Chief Val. "We accept your challenge," Jinwoo said in a clear, strong voice that carried easily through the silent hall. The alien's mandibles clicked rapidly, which might have been laughter or surprise. "Excellent, small human. Your bravery is noted, though. It will not save your species from their fate. Your warriors have 7 of your day cycles to reach Nexus Station. The coordinates will be transmitted to your primitive communication systems. Valex's forearms spread wide in what appeared to be a gesture of mock generosity. Come armed with your finest technology, human. Bring your most advanced weapons, your strongest armor, your deadliest innovations. You will need every advantage you can muster. Our champions have never known defeat. We understand the terms, Jinwoo replied calmly. Do you? Valex's head tilted, studying the small human before him. Do you truly comprehend what awaits your warriors? They will face beings who have conquered worlds, creatures bred for battle, trained from birth in the art of war. Your primitive weapons and fragile bodies will be as nothing before our might. We will send our weapons, Jinwoo said simply. As the transmission began to fade, Valex's voice echoed through the chamber one final time. 7 cycles, human. Do not disappoint us by failing to appear. That would rob us of our entertainment. The hologram vanished, leaving the assembly hall in stunned silence. President Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair, her voice barely above a whisper. Ambassador Park, what weapons are you planning to send? Our military advisors will need time to select the right equipment, the right soldiers. How do we even fight beings like that? Jinwoo turned to face her, and for the first time since the transmission had begun, he allowed himself a small smile. It was barely visible, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth, but it was there. The most dangerous ones we have, Madame President, he said quietly. The ones that can destroy entire civilizations. The 3 human ships moved slowly through space, toward the massive structure that hung in orbit around the alien world below. Nexus Station was unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, its dark metal surface covered with strange lights and symbols that pulsed with alien energy. Thousands of smaller ships surrounded it like insects around a giant hive. Inside the station, beings from across the galaxy had gathered to watch what they believed would be a quick and bloody show. The observation decks were packed with creatures of every shape and size imaginable. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, others crawled on multiple limbs. There were beings made of what looked like living crystal, others that seemed to be made of gas, held together by glowing energy fields. They all had one thing in common though. They had come to see the humans die. War Chief Valex stood in his command center high above the docking bays. His 4 powerful arms crossed over his armored chest. Through the massive windows, he could see the human transport ships as they approached the docking ports. They were small and plain compared to the sleek warships of other species. No weapons were visible on their hulls. No armor plating protected their sides. Pitiful, Valex muttered to his aide, a smaller creature with 6 eyes that blinked in sequence. Their ships looked like cargo haulers, not vessels carrying mighty warriors. Around him, other members of the Zephyrian military watched the docking procedure with interest. Some were placing bets on how quickly their champions would defeat the humans. Others were already discussing what to do with Earth once this farce was over. Show me these legendary human warriors, Valex commanded. His aide activated the viewing screens that showed the interior of the docking bay. The human ships had just finished their docking procedures, and the airlocks were beginning to open. Steam hissed out as the seals broke, and then the first human stepped onto the station. What they saw was not what anyone had expected. Dr. Minho Kim was a man of average height, with graying hair and kind eyes behind simple glasses. He wore civilian clothes, a plain blue shirt, and dark pants. In his hand, he carried a small medical bag, the kind that doctors on Earth used for house calls. He looked around the docking bay with the curious expression of a tourist seeing a new place for the first time. Behind him came Sujin Lee, a woman in her 30s with short black hair and strong hands marked with old scars from her work as a firefighter. She stretched her arms above her head and yawned, as if she had just woken up from a nap during the long journey. Her clothes were simple work clothes, and she carried only a small backpack. The third person to emerge was Jae Yen Nam, a young woman with a gentle face and patient eyes. She was an elementary school teacher, and she moved with the careful, measured steps of someone used to being around children. In her arms, she carried a cloth bag that bulged with what appeared to be books. Hyen-Soo Choi stepped out next, a paramedic who had spent years responding to emergencies in the busy streets of Seoul. He immediately began checking the contents of a basic medical kit, counting supplies, and organizing equipment with the automatic movements of someone who had done the same routine thousands of times. The last human was Bora Shin, a search and rescue coordinator. She surveyed the docking bay with professional eyes, noting exits, emergency equipment, and potential hazards. Her movements were calm and efficient, like someone who was used to walking into dangerous situations and finding ways to keep people safe. In the observation areas above the docking bay, the alien crowd began to murmur with confusion. These were not warriors. These were not soldiers in armor carrying advanced weapons. These were just ordinary people who looked like they were going to work or visiting friends. Then the murmuring turned to laughter. Creatures from across the galaxy pointed at the humans and made sounds that were clearly mocking in any language. Some of the more aggressive species roared their amusement, while others clicked or whistled or made whatever sounds passed for laughter in their cultures. "This is a joke," shouted a massive creature with scales and multiple heads. "Where are their weapons? Where's their armor? Humans must be even more primitive than we thought," called out another voice from somewhere in the crowd. In the command center, Valak stared at the screens in disbelief. His mandibles clicked rapidly as his anger grew. "Is this some form of mockery?" he snarled into his communicator, speaking to the aide who was coordinating the arrival procedures. "Where are their weapons? Where are their warriors?" The aide, who had been watching the humans carefully, paused before responding. There was something about these 5 people that made him uncertain. They showed no fear, no nervousness, no signs of being overwhelmed by their situation. They moved with a quiet confidence that seemed almost out of place. "Perhaps," the aide said slowly, "they are the weapons, War Chief." Valak's laugh was harsh and filled with contempt. "These soft creatures, look at them. They carry medical supplies and children's books. This will be over before it begins." But even as he spoke, Valak found himself continuing to watch the humans on the screens. As they were escorted toward their quarters by a group of armed guards, they walked with steady steps and calm faces. The doctor was asking questions about the medical facilities on the station. The teacher was looking at the alien architecture with genuine interest. The firefighter was studying the emergency systems built into the walls. They did not look like people who expected to die in a few days. They looked like people who knew exactly what they were doing and were completely confident in their plan. Some of the more observant aliens in the crowd had noticed this too, and their laughter was beginning to fade into thoughtful silence. The arena floor was covered with sand that had soaked up the blood of countless warriors over the years. High above, thousands of alien beings filled the viewing areas, their various sounds of excitement creating a deafening roar that echoed off the metal walls. They had come to see violence, to watch the weak humans be destroyed by the Empire's greatest fighters. War Chief Valak stood at his viewing platform, his 4 arms resting on the railing as he looked down at the arena floor. This was his favorite part of conquering new worlds, watching their so-called champions fall before Zephyrian might. It always made the surrender talks go much smoother. "Begin the first trial." His voice boomed across the arena through the communication system. Dr. Minho Kim walked slowly onto the sandy floor, his medical bag still in his hand. He looked small and fragile compared to the massive arena around him. Across from him, a gate opened with a loud grinding sound, and his opponent emerged. The Chronok warrior was a nightmare of muscle and natural armor, standing nearly 8 feet tall. His entire body was covered in a hard shell that looked like it had been carved from black stone. Scars covered every visible surface, telling the story of hundreds of battles. in his massive hands. He carried 2 curved blades that gleamed in the arena lights. The crowd screamed with bloodlust as the Chronarch began his charge, his heavy feet pounding against the sand. His weapons were raised high, ready to cut the small human in half with a single blow. But Minho did not run. He did not try to dodge or fight back. Instead, he dropped to his knees beside something that lay near the arena wall, the broken body of an alien gladiator from the previous match, forgotten and left to die in the sand. The Chronarch's charge carried him forward, his blades sweeping down toward the kneeling human. But at the last second, something made him pause. The human had thrown himself over the wounded fighter, using his own body as a shield. "Easy, friend," Minho said softly, his hands already working to examine the alien's injuries. He spoke in broken Chronarch language, the words clumsy, but clearly sincere. "Let me help. This wound needs pressure here." The massive warrior stood frozen, his weapons still raised. In all his years of fighting, he had never seen anything like this. Warriors fought, they killed, or were killed. They did not stop in the middle of combat to help the wounded. Minho worked quickly, pulling supplies from his medical bag. He pressed cloth against the worst bleeding, spoke gently to keep the injured alien calm, and began the careful work of saving a life. The crowd above had gone quiet, confused by what they were seeing. Within minutes, the wounded gladiator was sitting up. His bleeding had stopped, and his breathing was steady. He looked up at the human who had saved him with eyes full of wonder and gratitude. The Chronarch warrior slowly lowered his weapons. His scarred face showed emotions that seemed foreign to him: confusion, respect, and something that might have been shame. "I cannot fight one who saves my battle brother," he announced, his deep voice carrying clearly across the silent arena. He knelt beside Minho and began helping with the bandages. His massive hands, surprisingly gentle. The crowd erupted in confused noise, but it was different now. Instead of bloodthirsty cheers, there were questions, arguments, and uncertain murmurs, in dozens of alien languages. The second trial was designed to test aerial combat skills. Sujin Lee faced a course filled with floating platforms, explosive traps, and collapsing structures. The goal was simple: navigate the obstacles while fighting off automated weapons and reach the end alive. Sujin moved through the course with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years running into burning buildings. She dodged the explosions, leaped between platforms, and avoided the mechanical weapons with skills learned from a lifetime of emergency response work. But then something went wrong with the course systems. A massive piece of burning metal broke loose from one of the platforms and went spinning toward the observation deck, where a group of alien children were watching with their families. Sujin saw the danger immediately. Without thinking, she abandoned her course completely and began climbing the arena wall. Her strong hands found holes in the metal structure as debris rained down around her. She moved with desperate speed, reaching the observation area just as the burning metal crashed into the seats where the children had been sitting. She threw herself over the alien youngsters, her own body taking the impact of falling sparks and sharp fragments. Her clothes began to smoke, and cuts opened on her arms and back, but she held her position until the danger passed. Then she began guiding the frightened children to safety, speaking softly in her own language while using gestures they could understand. The crowd had gone completely silent now. These were not the actions of a warrior trying to win glory. This was something else entirely. By the third trial, everything had changed. When teacher Jae-Jon Nam entered the arena, she found that her scheduled opponent, a fierce reptilian fighter, was sitting in the center of the floor with his weapons laid aside. "I will not fight you," he said simply. "You are not here to hurt anyone." Other gladiators began emerging from their holding areas, not to fight, but to see what was happening. Some of the alien spectators had climbed down from their seats and were helping tend to the wounded from previous matches. Children from various species gathered around Jaeyan as she sat cross-legged in the sand and began reading from one of her books, her gentle voice somehow making the stories understandable even to those who could not speak her language. In the command center above, War Chief Valix watched with growing fury. His four hands were clenched into fists, and his mandibles clicked rapidly with rage. They are making a mockery of our sacred trials. He roared at his aide, but the aide was staring at the communication panels, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid sequence as reports came in from across the galaxy. War Chief, he said quietly, the trials are being broadcast across 17 star systems, our subject worlds. They are laying down their weapons, refusing to fight. They are calling the humans the gentle weapons. The lights in the command center flashed red as alarms blared throughout Nexus Station. War Chief Valix stood before the massive viewing screens, his forearms shaking with fury as he watched the chaos unfolding in the arena below. What should have been a simple display of Zephyrian dominance had turned into something he could not understand or control. This ends now, Valix roared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he turned to his communications officer. Send the order to all ships in the fleet. Open fire on the human vessels. If these creatures will not fight as warriors, they will die as the weaklings they are. The communications officer hesitated, his multiple eyes blinking nervously. War Chief, there are still thousands of spectators on the station. If we begin a battle here, I did not ask for your opinion. Valix snarled. Give the order. Within minutes, the Zephyrian battle fleet moved into attack position around Nexus Station. Dozens of sleek warships, each one capable of destroying entire cities, turned their weapons toward the 3 small human transport vessels. The first barrage of plasma fire lit up the darkness of space, tearing through the hulls of the human ships and sending debris spinning into the void. But what happened next was something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. As explosions rocked Nexus Station and emergency lights began flashing throughout the corridors, paramedic Hyensu Choi was already moving. Instead of seeking shelter or trying to escape, he ran toward the areas where the damage was worst. His medical training had taught him that the first few minutes after an accident were the most important for saving lives. He found alien medical staff standing in confusion near a collapsed section of corridor, unsure of what to do as their own. People began shooting at the station. Hyensu approached them with his hands visible and his voice calm. We need to set up emergency treatment areas, he said, pulling supplies from his medical kit. Here, and over there by that wall. The wounded will be coming soon. The alien doctors looked at him in amazement. You want to help us, but we are at war now. Hyensu was already kneeling beside a Zephyrian soldier who had been injured by falling debris. I am a paramedic, he said simply, as he began checking the alien's vital signs. War or no war, wounded people need help. Are you going to stand there, or are you going to save lives? The alien medical staff looked at each other for a moment, then began following his directions. Within minutes, they had organized the most efficient trauma response the station had ever seen, in another part of Nexus Station. Search and Rescue Coordinator Biora Shin was doing what she did best. As the structure shook from repeated plasma strikes, she moved through the corridors, identifying the safest evacuation routes and organizing the frightened civilians who were trapped inside. Stay calm and follow me, she called out to a mixed group of aliens from different species. Some were the same creatures who had been cheering for human blood just hours before. But Biora treated them all with the same professional care she would show to anyone in danger. She led them through darkened hallways, around collapsed sections, and past sparking electrical systems. When they reached a junction where 3 corridors met, they found their path blocked by a squad of Zephyrian warriors in full battle armor. The aliens behind Biora cried out in fear, expecting to be killed or captured. But Bora stepped forward calmly, her empty hands raised so the soldiers could see she carried no weapons. "We are trying to save your people too," she said clearly, looking directly at the squad leader. "Help us, or get out of our way." The Zephyrian warriors stared at her for a long moment. Their training told them to capture or kill the human, but something about her calm confidence made them hesitate. Behind her, the group of evacuees included Zephyrian civilians, their own people. The squad leader slowly lowered his weapon. You are helping our families." "I am helping everyone I can find," Biora replied. "That is what we do." The warriors looked at each other, then began assisting with the evacuation. Soon, they were carrying injured civilians and guiding frightened families through the safest routes to the emergency shelters throughout Nexus Station. Similar scenes were playing out. Dr. Minho Kim moved from one crisis to another, treating wounded beings regardless of which species they belonged to. His calm voice and gentle hands brought comfort to creatures who had never imagined that an enemy could show such kindness. Sujin Lee used her firefighting experience to help contain the damage from the plasma strikes, working alongside alien emergency crews to prevent the station's life support systems from failing completely. She crawled through dangerous areas to rescue trapped individuals, never asking whether they were friend or enemy. In a damaged section that had once been a children's viewing area, teacher J.J. Yan Nam was found by a Zephyrian boarding party, who had been sent to capture any surviving humans. Instead of finding a cowering prisoner, they discovered her sitting calmly in the middle of a group of alien children from various species, using pieces of debris to build a small shelter around them. The soldiers raised their weapons, but then they heard the soft sound of her voice as she sang a gentle song to keep the children calm. Some of the youngsters were crying, others were injured, but all of them were looking at her with trust and hope. "Why do you protect those who are not your own?" one of the soldiers asked in broken standard language, his weapon still raised but his voice uncertain. J-Yeon looked up from bandaging a small wound on a Chronok child's arm. Her voice was patient, like she was explaining something obvious to one of her students back on Earth. "Because they are children," she said simply. "That makes them everyone's responsibility." The soldier stared at her for a long moment, then slowly removed his helmet. His face was covered with scars from many battles, but his eyes showed confusion and something that might have been hope. I have younglings of my own," he admitted quietly. Jae-yeon smiled at him with the same gentle expression she used with nervous parents during school conferences. "Then you understand," she said. "Help me get them to safety." The soldier set down his weapon and knelt beside her, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped move the children to a safer location. The Great Hall of the Galactic Confederation had never seen anything like this before. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the massive chamber, their various forms creating a sea of colors and shapes that stretched as far as the eye could see. But today, none of them were focused on their usual political games or trade disputes. Instead, every eye was fixed on the reports flooding in from across known space. Supreme Chancellor Theron, an ancient being whose crystalline form had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations over the past 1,000 years, stood at the center podium. His voice, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously, carried the weight of centuries. "In all my years," he began slowly, "I have never called an emergency session for anything like this. But what we are witnessing today changes everything. We thought we knew about power, about conquest, and about what it means to be strong." Behind him, massive screens displayed images from across the galaxy. On one screen, Zephyrian soldiers, on a distant mining world, had laid down their weapons and were helping their former prisoners repair damaged equipment. On another, an entire star system that had been locked in civil war for decades was declaring an immediate ceasefire. Report after report showed the same impossible thing happening everywhere. Beings who had been enemies for generations were choosing peace, Ambassador Jinwoo Park walked slowly to the speaker's platform, followed by the 5 humans who had somehow brought down the most powerful military empire in the galaxy without firing a single shot. Dr. Minho Kim still wore bandages on his arms from treating wounded aliens under enemy fire. Sujin Lee's work clothes were scorched and torn from her rescue operations during the battle at Nexus Station. Jaehyun Nam carried a small piece of paper in her hands, a drawing made by an alien child showing humans and aliens standing together under a bright sun. Honored delegates, Jinwoo began, his weathered voice carrying easily through the massive chamber. When the Zephyrian Empire demanded that we send our greatest warriors, you expected us to send soldiers. You thought we would bring advanced weapons, powerful armor, and military technology. Instead, we sent you something far more dangerous. He gestured to the 5 people standing beside him. We sent you humans who wage war against suffering itself. From the prisoner's dock at the side of the chamber, War Chief Phalix struggled against his restraints. Even in chains, the massive alien's presence was intimidating, his 4 arms and armored shell making him look like a living weapon. But his voice, when he spoke, carried the desperate anger of someone whose entire world had been turned upside down. You mocked the warrior's code. Phalix snarled, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Your species has no honor. You won by cheating, by refusing to fight, like true warriors should. Dr. Minho Kim stepped forward from the group of humans. Despite his bandages and obvious exhaustion from the recent events, his voice was calm and steady. It was the same voice he used when speaking to frightened patients in the emergency room, gentle but completely confident. We have something better than your honor, War Chief, he said quietly, but his words carried clearly through the silent chamber. We have each other. Every human child learns from the moment they can walk that when someone is hurt, you help them. When someone is afraid, you protect them. When someone is lost, you guide them home. It does not matter if they are your species, your nation, or your enemy. It only matters that they need help. Phalix's eyes burned with fury. This is impossible. No species could survive with such weakness. The strong must rule the weak. That is the natural order of the universe. Biora Shin, the search and rescue coordinator whose calm leadership had saved thousands of lives during the chaos at Nexus Station, looked at the alien leader with something that might have been pitied. We are not weak because we care, War Chief, she said sadly. We are unstoppable because we do. Your empire lasted for centuries because you ruled through fear. You made people obey by threatening to hurt them if they did not. But fear dies when people see a better way to live. She gestured to the screens around the chamber, which continued to show images of former enemies working together across the galaxy. Look at what is happening. Your own soldiers are choosing to help instead of hurt. Your subject worlds are not rebelling. They are simply refusing to fight anymore. They have seen that there is another choice. Supreme Chancellor crystalline form pulsed with light as he spoke. His ancient voice carried the wisdom of someone who had seen the patterns of history repeat themselves countless times over the centuries. In 800 years of interstellar civilization, he said slowly, we have seen weapons beyond counting. We have witnessed plasma cannons that can crack planets open like eggs. We have seen viral agents that can sterilize entire star systems, leaving them empty of all life. We have watched quantum bombs collapse suns and destroy everything in their path. He paused, his glowing form turning to look directly at the 5 humans. But never have we witnessed weapons like these, weapons that destroy empires not through violence, but by offering something better. The vote, when it came, was unlike anything in the Confederation's history. Not a single delegate voted against the proposal. Earth was not only granted full membership and autonomy, but was invited to establish the first galactic humanitarian corps. The Zephyrian Empire's former subject worlds, one after another, requested to join the new alliance. As the session ended and the delegates began to disperse, The humans prepared for their journey back to Earth. On board their transport ship, Teacher JG and Nem stood by a large window, looking out at the stars. The galaxy looked the same as it had when they left Earth, but she knew that everything had changed. "Do you think it will last?" she asked quietly as Ambassador Jinwoo joined her at the window. "This peace we have started." The old diplomat was quiet for a long moment, watching the distant lights of alien worlds. "Perhaps," he said finally, "but even if it does not, we have shown the galaxy something important, that there is another way to be strong." Behind them, the other 4 humans were already talking about returning to their normal lives. Dr. Minho spoke of patients waiting for treatment. Sujin mentioned a new fire safety program she wanted to start. Hyensu was planning improvements to emergency response procedures. Biora was thinking about training programs for disaster relief. They had conquered an empire without firing a shot, simply by being human in the most fundamental way possible. The galaxy would never be the same.